The future is human, and AI doesn't care. And I think you put those two together. The culture of a generation is a mirror of its leadership, both.
If students write on a laptop versus pen and a paper, they're more likely to remember, they're more likely to connect with what they're writing, they understand better, they comprehend better. So old school is always better.
Life's too short to sometimes worry about the things that we put on the top of our priority list when it comes to worrying. Just to put your head down and get it done, right? Well, it's grit. Grit over everything. What do you need to have a growth mindset? You've got to have curiosity.
Companies are ready to spend 100K on one person. They would rather spend just 1K on 100 employees and get so much more.
Who can help you create that shared understanding success? So start the day with clarity, end the day with humility.
Hi, everyone. Today I have a very special guest on our podcast episode, Alex Draper. Alex Draper is the CEO and founder of DX Learning, a leadership development firm that helps individuals and teams build trust, high performance cultures. He's a seasoned speaker and the author of Care to Win. Alex has worked with top tier companies and fast growing startups to close the gap between leadership behavior and organizational success. His mission to prove that trust is in soft skills. It is the ultimate competitive advantage. So let's see what Alex Draper has to say about leadership, building high performance teams, organizational culture, trust, and autonomy. So, Alex, thank you so much for coming on to today's show and episode. I'm so grateful for your time and energy.
Thanks for having me, Shagun.
So Alex, you've been in the leadership space and in the corporate training space for so long, and I read a lot about what you teach. And one of your sayings say culture is a mirror of leadership. So can you share an example where shifting leadership behavior transformed a toxic team?
Yeah, the reason why we say culture is a mirror of leadership is if you just think about basic mirror neurons, first of all. If I was to put a paper cut here in my finger, the same neuron would fire in your brain that's firing in my brain. So while I would feel pain, you would feel my pain. Yeah. And when a baby in an infirmary cries, all babies cry. So we're hardwired with mirror neurons, which just means, again, as a leader, if I show up with a smile on my face consistently, my team will show up with a smile on their face. If I bring stress, they'll be stressed. So when it comes to your question, I mean, I'm the perfect example. For many years, and I've seen this in other leaders that I've coached and worked with, I became the leader that I'm trying to wipe out. And actually, I had some ego. My ego got the better of me because I wanted to grow my company and be the next Franklin Covey and next Ken Blanchard. And that drove a certain mindset that started to rub off on the team. So my ego to become number one actually rubbed off on my team to become number one. And we ended up starting to treat each other with that ego. And it goes against the whole culture of our company. So I became one of those leaders that I'm trying to eradicate with a ego-driven mindset, which rubbed off my team. And I see that all the time out there where you just don't know it, but the unintentional consequences of not managing our brains, because our brains are very selfish and self-centered, can unintentionally, of course, cause toxicity within a team, if not intentionally managed.
Yeah, intentionally managed. And the word intention is so important over here. But Alex, do you feel that even one person can have such a big impact on the entire team?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it depends on the level of influence and respect that person has. I'll go back to trust. You know, Charles H. Green's trusted advisor. It's to gain trust. It's credibility, reliability, and intimacy over self-orientation. So that denominator, the self-orientation, is what I talked about there, where ego, of course, which is me orientation, or selflessness, which is them orientation, that's, of course, a huge contributing factor to building trust. So essentially, if you're all about yourself, you've got ego, it's nearly improbable scientifically that you're going to build trust, which is fascinating. So there's your ego is a culture killer, period. Then above it, with credibility, intimacy, and reliability, I think if you've got a leader who of course, his orientation is about others, and then they had that respect through reliability and credibility, then they can really, really change a team because everyone looks to them. They have high levels of trust and influence. And I love the saying, change one, change 1,000. But not all leaders have that trust. So I think the answer to your question is yes, and some do, depending on how much influence and trust they have. Some not so much because they don't have that influence and trust, and therefore it doesn't really matter how they behave. No one's going to follow them anyway.
Yeah, totally agree with you, Alex. And, there's a right saying that however the top management is, it just trickles down to the bottom of the organization. And that's why leadership becomes so important. I mean, we can look at a practical real life example, how Microsoft employees and the culture was when Steve Ballmer was a CEO and when Satya Nadella was a CEO. The huge difference, cultural shift the company saw when the leadership changed.
And I reply yes and to that as well. With 300,000 employees, there's only so much you can do, and it's a public company, so there's. But I agree in the fact that there was a huge shift in curiousness and growth mindset. Right, that was the whole point of the culture, was we've got to have a curious and growth minded orientation. But having a lot of friends who work there, I do know the underbelly. It may seem really good on the outside and probably way better than it was, but it's not all curiousness and growth mindset. It's that, yes. And I think that goes back full circle to your question, which is even in a large organization, extremely large organization like Microsoft, there can still be wonderful, amazing examples of great leadership where people are very curious and have a growth mindset. And at the same time, there can be a lot of examples of not so good leadership, which goes against the grain. And in a toxic organization, you can still have great leaders who go against the grain. So I think it does come back down to the culture of a team is a mirror of its leader, or can be a mirror of its leader, if that leader so chooses to intentionally create a culture through their understanding of what they model becomes how others follow them. And of course, what's important about modeling is values, because values drives how you behave, and how you behave is how people experience you, which is really, for me, the true art of culture. It's really how you behave and how people feel as a result of your leadership.
Yeah, because it's said that people always remember how you made them feel. And I think that's very true. We've all experienced that. And talk about growth mindset, Alex, with every generation, the wants and the needs of people are changing, Gen Z, boomers. So, how can the people from the previous generations have a more growth mindset and be more adaptive and adjusting to the changing needs of every generation?
Let's have some fun with this. It's a great question. So I'll go generationally and culturally. So I'm British originally, living here in Chicago now. How I was brought up was I'm Gen X, so 47. 47 this year. I mean, I look older, but anyway. So I was brought up in a world where you were not allowed to be vulnerable, right? My mum taught me never to show your feelings, just to put your head down and get it done, right? Well, it's grit. Grit over everything was how I was brought up. Now, you don't change that. My first teachers were the same way. My first boss was the same way. So these are now ingrained, and I think a lot of Generation X and baby boomers live in a certain way. It was grit. You are what you experience, right? So neural pathways are biased to how experiences. So what you grew up with, so which means your parents, your first teachers, your school, your friends, and your first boss are all experiences that shape you, who you are. No generation is right or wrong. No culture, whether you grew up in India, Pakistan, Japan, England, America, or Texas versus California. There's no right and no wrong. It's just your experiences make you who you are. What we're seeing, of course, is a dissonance between boomers and X, and I'd say some millennials, and a generation that's been brought up with parents that are extremely different parenting techniques to what I was brought up. So I'm a parent. I've got an 8-year-old and a 7-year-old. How I'm parenting them and how my wife and I parent them is very different to how I was parented. And the schools that they're growing up in, it's really different. I remember being at school and it was very authoritarian. I remember my religious teacher throwing things at me. was how So just, it's really different. So with both a very different parenting and a very different school set, you're seeing now, of course, these generations grow up and have a different set of values. And to answer your question, I think the biggest challenge we have with this generation with the growth mindset. So what do you need to have a growth mindset? You've got to have curiosity. Technology is also making a big difference in all of this, right? The technology revolution. And I'll make a sweeping assumption with no data to support my hypothesis. But the curiosity that we had because we were forced into curiosity, right? I was forced to having autonomy. Most latch door kids go out, have fun, good luck, come back at 10 o'clock. And if you come back, that's great. But there was no phone, so we were given autonomy. We had to figure it out.
Yeah.
They're not figuring it out, not because of bad intentions. It's just that they have everything at their disposal. They're not thinking like we did logically. I mean, I had MapQuest. I printed something off, and I was lucky to get from A to B. So I think we have to have empathy for the generation that's coming through. They need to realize that what drives curiosity in the growth mindset is thinking and challenging and asking questions, of which we're not asking as many questions as we used to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we feel scared. We feel we'll be judged. We feel scared of that what we are asking might be a stupid question, while there's no question as a stupid question.
No, and I go, well, I wonder why that is. Now, is it parenting? Is it the school system? What are we doing? And again, culture is a mirror of leadership. So I always go back to that saying is the culture of a generation is a mirror of its leadership, both from politicians to teachers to parents. We're all shaping. So the kids that are coming through, and what I see in the business side of things is fascinating, because you've got boomers and X's pointing fingers at the young generation saying they're not resilient, they're not agile, they don't ask enough questions. I'm like, it's not their fault. It's our fault.
It's absolutely not their fault. I mean, social media is shaping a big part of their lives. And then comes comparison, and then comes, there are so many factors, and we can't blame them. We have to align with them, I would say.
Yeah. And the sad part of social media is the lack of regulation, right? So, when it comes to curiosity and opinions and just living and breathing the growth mindset, you need good data. Bad data in, bad data out. And unfortunately, what we're hearing and seeing is bad data in, which means even worse data out. And I think that's a problem in its own right.
Yeah, true. Alex, my next question is, many leaders equate care with being soft. How do you respond to skeptics, those dismiss human-centered leadership as a non-strategic choice?
I hope anybody listening to this would agree with this next statement. There is nothing soft about leadership. And I equate leadership to parenting. While we're not all parents, it's the same rules. Culture is a mirror of leadership. My wife and I lead our team, which is my kids, and at work, myself and my leadership team lead my team members. Same rules. They're just different forms of kids. They need leadership, and humans are challenging, right? Every human is different. Every human has its experiences, and every human needs to be led, and it's really tough. So no, we all agree there's nothing soft. Yet, what you call something. I'm a big fan of Priya Parker's work, right? The Art of Gathering, wonderful book. And chapter number 1, well, why are we gathering? What you call it becomes how you think about it. So the framing effect is so powerful. So we're framing this thing called soft skills. So of course, an executive who goes, why are we spending millions of dollars on soft skills? It sounds soft. Well, if we call it something soft, then of course it's viewed as something soft. So I wish we would call them human skills, because we need them to get the most out of the people that we work with. Everyone deserves the right to be led effectively. It's scientifically improbable that anyone was ever born to be a leader, because our brain is a selfish, self-centered piece of machinery just trying to keep you alive. So just, leadership's about keeping us alive, but our brain's trying to keep me alive. So you've got thousands of heuristics and 188 biases. Well, to become an effective leader, you have to overcome those. And if you're not educating people on that, then that's a problem. So I think it's two things. Number one, it's not soft. And number two, it's not something that we're innately born with. And we have to work really hard at developing human skills.
Do you think it's becoming even harder with the advent of AI and evolving technologies?
I will answer that with a no and a why. And again, feel free to ask more questions and let me know what you think. So AI, in its purest sense, is a productivity tool, an efficiency tool. I created a new in 6 months, I created a brand new go-to-market strategy for my business. And I didn't have to hire a chief marketing officer to do it. Way cheaper, by the way. And I probably got to the answer way quicker, faster, and better than with a bunch of humans. So I say that because AI, if used with its natural intentions, actually saves you time and saves you energy to focus, theoretically, to focus more time on being a leader. So I think it should improve the status quo and the fact that leaders, if they're using AI and technology to do some of the things that we used to go to leaders for, like we used to go to a chief marketing officer to create a marketing strategy. Yeah. Well, what if we went to that CMO now for leadership and to ensure that everyone is being catered for and humans are getting what they need. So I think what we go to our managers, stroke leaders for in the future should change. And I think is changing because if they're leveraging the technology at their disposal, then they have more time and energy to focus on their people, which they haven't, of course. I go IQ, EQ. We've focused so heavily on the IQ. We send people to MBA and to go to Kellogg and Chicago Booth, and we show them how to be amazing with Excel spreadsheets, but we don't teach them how to lead people. And what's the point of strategy unless your people want to do it? So I'm hoping that more emphasis on the human side in the years to come.
Do you think the future of leadership is human? Because that is one line I always use in my keynote. Sometimes it's the opening, sometimes it's the ending. But I always have highlighted this in my demo speaking video also, that the future of leadership is human.
I'll add to that. AI doesn't care.
Yeah.
And will never care. And if you think it does, that's a problem, right? No, the future is human, and AI doesn't care. And I think you put those two together, it really teaches us. It's framing what the future is, right?
Yeah.
The sad part for me is I look at all the movies about the future and it doesn't look very human. So we're going to have to go against some of the movies out there. But
right.
I'm hoping that because it's a rough time right now, having been in this industry for 22 years.
Right.
I've seen the ups and downs. It is very cyclical. I've seen huge investments in human, and I've seen a greater emphasis on culture. And as Gallup results came out last week, we're going backwards.
We're going backwards. Yes, even I read that.
We have 4,000 weekends.
Yeah.
But it's 168 hours a week. This life is over before you know it.
Yeah.
And I just don't think we understand fully of you don't get time back. Like once it's gone, it's gone. Yeah. And work is work. You quoted Maya, right? I'll forget what you say, I forget what you do, but I'll never forget how you made me feel. Yeah. It's amazing how quickly we forget work and we forget the hours we spent at work. And what do we remember? Remember that the best boss who created an environment for me to thrive. I remember my favorite teacher. I remember the mentor that really helped me through a tough time. I remember my kids. We just need to, in a heat of battle, which we're in right now, we need to be reminded of that fact. And it's life's too short to sometimes worry about the things that we put on the top of our priority list when it comes to worrying.
True. Absolutely true.
And I think this is where the younger generations are starting to challenge our generations and say, there needs to be more balance. And I would agree. I go back to my youth. I wish I hadn't worked as many weekends as I had worked in my 20s to try and get up and show my worth. I shouldn't have had to have done that. I did, and I'm sure many of us did, and I still do. I love my work, and sometimes I need to be told, Alex, stop working, to be reminded of they're not going to remember you for the work that you do, Alex. So I'm looking forward with curiosity about the younger generation and challenging this, especially in America, right? That everything's
Yeah.
about work.
Everything is about work. Yeah. So, Alex, if you had to pick one underrated skill that accelerates success, outside of traditional leadership advice, because that is mostly what we hear, what would that be?
Gosh, the hard part of this question is it's only one. Um, but I would have to say this. I ask myself a question every day. And that question is, at the end of the day, would I follow me? What that question does is it just gets you to think about the day and to think about what you did and what you didn't do, what you said and what you didn't say, all the emails that you sent, the phone calls that you had, and just go, would you follow you? Because if you didn't, and that's okay, it's like, oh, and I think the most underrated skill, therefore, is really, it's, for me, that's growth mindset, which triggers humility, which keeps that narcissism and ego to one side and puts it into a box and says, not today, because going back to self-orientation is the biggest contributing factor to trust. And trust is the most underrated leadership attribute of a team. Then what's the most important part? It's just keeping that growth mindset, keeping the awareness of your awareness of what's working, not working. So most underrated skill, but misunderstood, I go, is growth mindset. But what's the most important contributing factor is humility and reducing ego and asking yourself a very simple question like, would you follow you? Or I think any questions, any what, how, when question. What did you do today that was impressive? What are you proud of? What did you do today that you wouldn't do differently tomorrow? So for me, those curiosity questions about yourself really, I rarely ever hear anyone talk about that, right? Putting a calendar invite for 15 minutes for yourself, because in leadership, especially, if you can't look after yourself, and how can you look after your team, right? Unhappy culture is a mirror of leadership. Unhappy parent, unhappy kid. Unhappy boss, unhappy team. Ego-driven boss, ego-driven team. Curious boss, curious team. So it's the lost art of open-ended questions about yourself.
About yourself. Yeah. I mean, I love the saying, lead yourself first. And also, what you said beautifully resonated with me. When I am leading my employees, I always feel that, is this how I would like to be led? So, is this how they want to be led by me? And then, you have to put yourself um, in that box where you're questioning your own leadership style. Because most times we forget that self accountability.
Yeah, I don't know if have you read the book by Tasha Urich, Insight?
No.
It's a wonderful book on self-awareness. And her empirical research says that 95% of us think that we're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% are. And it's the gap between how we see ourselves and how others receive us. The bigger the gap, the bigger the problems. And by asking yourself, and self-awareness is not self-created, but at least by asking yourself questions, you're just minimizing that gap and raising more awareness, and stopping the Dunning-Kruger effect of not knowing yourself, right? The most confident people who don't ask those questions and go out there and shout the loudest tend to be the least competent. And at very least, you're stopping yourself from being that person.
Yeah, 100%. So, Alex, you talked about the underrated skill. Now, can you talk about the non negotiable habit that would make anyone a better leader? something that they can do every day, like a ritual?
Yeah, what I just said, which is at the end of the day, put a calendar invite to say, would you follow you? Right. So that's the end of day, which triggers that growth mindset, reduces ego, and makes you the humble leader that people love, and will follow. Let's do the start of the day, because primacy and recency. So recency, last thing you do, primacy, the first thing you do. At DX, the book that I wrote and all of our research is built on trust and how do you build higher performance. And those two are interconnected, right? So we call the book Care to Win, right? So we need to win. We've all got to win. And we need to, I hope we all agree that in order to win, whatever you're trying to win at, market share, margins, employee engagement, retention, I hope you agree that it's people, with good people who trust you and respect you and follow you, you're more likely to win. So, and care's not cuddly. So the first part of care is clarity. So really quick, C stands for clarity, A stands for autonomy, R stands for relationships, and E stands for equity. So to start the day, I always start the day with clarity. Simplicity scales, complexity fails. The more clear you are with your communication, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Who needs to be involved, and when do you need to get things done by? And clarity in all the companies that we've worked with, what we found out over the last 5 years, we have a big clarity problem in America. Every time that we do our culture diagnostic and do our assessment, both on the 360 and a cultural diagnostic, clarity comes up every single time as the Achilles heel. It's fascinating. So start the day, deep breath, 50 minutes of quiet time. What do I need to get done today? Why do I need to get that done? Who do I need to involve? And when is the deadline? And who do I need to involve is really important, because clarity is a shared understanding of success. Who can help you create that shared understanding of success? So start the day with clarity, end the day with humility.
How important is writing if you want to have a clear mind?
One of my team found a body of research that says you're 42% more likely to do something if you write it down.
If you write it down, yes, that's true.
Pretty important. So much so that what's sitting on, you can't see it, but underneath my mic here is every Sunday I spend 90 minutes writing my week down. And in the world of technology, where the good old fashioned, I mean, they don't even probably teach this at school anymore. You got to write handwriting. And I know we all have different preferences, but again, if you write it down, it connects to the brain, and you're just more likely to do it.
Yeah, I get this research behind it. If students write on a laptop versus pen and a paper, they're more likely to remember, they're more likely to connect with what they're writing, they understand better, they comprehend better. So old school is always better, how much ever far you go.
It is better. The challenge that we have, and we're having this discussion right now as a business, with sustainability and of course the amount of trees that we're knocking down to get paper, and do we go to a digital only output? So we do leadership training, and sometimes when it's in person, people are writing things down, and when does that become too archaic and Jurassic? I don't know the answer to that, but I know the day is coming at one stage in the future where there are no pens anymore. These have become obsolete, and that's a sad day.
That's a sad day. True, I was going to add that too. So, what's the trend in workplace culture? Because we're talking so much about culture and its importance, that nobody's talking about but should be talking about.
They are talking about it, but they're not talking about it enough, nor in the right way. I think, as we said earlier, just continuing the red thread, culture is a mirror of leadership. So one of my values personally is humility. So that drives how I behave. You'll always see me ask questions. You'll see me ask for help. You'll see me speak last. So that value of humility drives my behaviors, which drives how people experience me, which ends up being culture. And again, I've worked with hundreds of companies all over the world, and it saddens me how little we take seriously the importance of values. And for most organizations, they're just writing on the wall. It goes on the websites. It goes in the annual reports. Our values are people first and customer centricity and transparency.
Yeah.
And that's where it stops, right? So we're not talking about how important values are, and the leadership training that I witness. It's just the latest fad. Let's do something on psychological safety, or let's do something on accountability. And for me, values should drive everything. It drives your talent development strategy. It drives performance management. It drives who you hire, who you fire, who gets to make it to the CEO.
Yeah, so beautiful. I mean, people first is the first thing that we hear when it comes to most companies' values, but how much of that is practically implemented and how much of that every employee feels in the company, that's what is important.
We call it the culture conning, where you say when you say one thing, so you hire someone on the onboarding process, they go, we have a innovation driven value. Innovation is one of our values. And oh my God, I can't wait to work here. This is going to be amazing. And then your first boss never challenges the status quo and says, well, that's not how we do things around here. And that's kind of one of the quickest ways to lose people and disengage them is to say one thing and do another. And I'm tired of hearing older generations say, oh, the young are this. Well, and then they're very transient and keep moving companies. Well, they're moving companies because you're not doing a very good job in being clear and transparent about your culture. So stop mis-selling them on a false truth is my message to most of the executives I talk to.
That's amazing. I think that reality check is something that we all need. Alex, what is an unpopular opinion you have about productivity or leadership or employee well-being that always surprises people?
As Tina Turner said in her one of her songs, like, we don't need another hero. We've just got to stop thinking that there's heroes out there and that I, as a leader, am a hero. I'm not. It's not the well-being of my team. It's mutual accountability. I can't solve world peace. I can't solve all the issues that every single human being has. We've got to stop putting leaders on a pedestal and thinking that they're going to change everything. It's the move of me to we, right? And I think it's the best teams in the world. I have a saying at DX that says, high-performing teams need high-performing leaders. High-performing leaders need high-performing teams. We've got to create teams. So we put so much emphasis. We send all of our leaders to Harvard Business School for $1 million, and they come back. Well, nothing changes, let's be honest. We spend so much time and money on executives and spending so much money on developing them, but we don't spend the same amount of money or time or energy on developing the team, because there's only so much one person can do, and it's not that much, to be quite honest. It's developing the whole group, and I wish, it's unpopular because I say it a lot. I'm like, stop wasting all your money on sending one person to a leadership program and expect there to be big change. It ain't going to happen. It feels good sending someone to Harvard. It feels great. Oh, best school in the world, but it doesn't change anything. So just, it's a system that needs to be changed. And I think that's the sort of the message here is a hero can't change it alone. It's the systems that we need to really work on, which goes back to the previous answer to the previous question of the importance of values, and really getting serious about those. Because if you get serious about those, the answer to the second question, which is this one, which is what's unpopular, is, well, stop wasting all your money on leadership training that doesn't work, right? We spend 60 billion in this country, I think. And it's just, what? It doesn't work because engagement scores are going down. So I'll get off my pedestal now.
I feel more and more people should hear this podcast, especially this part, because this is so true. Like, companies are ready to spend 100K on one person, They would rather spend just 1K on 100 employees and get so much more.
It's the frustrating part of my business. We've got to save another $10,000 to train 1,000 people. Oh, our budget's $50K and put then to your point, I'll happily spend hundreds of thousands on sending my executives. It's just, that doesn't feel very fair. And also, there is no metrics of success. You send them to Harvard or Stanford, they don't care if they improve or not, and that's a travesty, right? And I think that's a travesty of our industry in general. Is the illogical emotional decision making in those with the budgets. They would prefer to send someone to the top business school, but not to the company that actually will work with you on the metrics and make sure that things transform, right? Why can't, in our industry, leadership development, the same regulations and rules that are in compliance training or legal, that surely we should have the same standards and expectations as any other industry, but we don't. There's no metrics. There's all little, and it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think for most companies, it's about checking that, I have spent this much on leadership, this much on executive, this much on the new CEO, and this much on the hiring of the CEO. But it doesn't spend as much on the bottom level or the mid level employees, which becomes a sad part because they are going to be the future leaders. And the sooner you train them, the faster they will start producing more for the company.
Agreed. And if you think about Gallup's, like them or not, it's still data, right? So we're going backwards and have done now for the last 4 years when it comes to actively engage people. Just take that data alone. Well, if 70% of the variance of employee engagement comes from your direct boss, your manager, then really it's the frontline and mid-level managers who have the most influence on engagement and therefore the most influence on profitability. Yet they get the least amount of money and time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, my next question, Alex, is autonomy is the key in care. I was reading about your book and your teachings, but some leaders fear losing control. They feel that if they give too much autonomy, they will start losing control over their subordinates. So, what's your advice for transitioning from micromanagement to trust? Because, like you said, trust is a big factor when determining the culture of a company.
Yeah, I always like to go to root cause. So I think two factors diminish a leader's desire and mindset to give autonomy, right? So one of our researchers determined that autonomy has the biggest contributing factor to psychological safety, which if you're obviously the threat circuitry is triggered when someone tries to control you, right? So it's huge contributing factor to psych safety and performance in general. So what stops us from giving autonomy? Two things. Number one, your own ego and probably narcissistic tendencies. Number one, you just have to be in control. And for some of those people, you just can't change them anyway. So that's one. The other one is clarity. What tends us? So remember, 188 biases. These are and if they're not managed, can lead to the unintentional consequences of micromanagement or lack of transparency or not giving feedback, the simple things that drive leadership forward. So your brain is basically telling you to do the opposite of what your team wants. And in this case, if you haven't managed to, so one of the biases is called the law of least effort. It's quicker and easier for me to tie your shoelaces than it is for me to let you tie your own shoelaces. That's what my brain's telling me to do, to tie my people's shoelaces. Because when there's deadlines, our brain is always designed to do the quickest and easiest thing, to say that heuristics kicking in. And the quickest and easiest thing to do when your child comes down in the morning and you're late for school is to tie her shoelaces, like I do, by the way. Because I'm like, I don't want the principal to call me and go, Mr. Draper, your child's late again, and so I'm just going to tie the shoelaces. And then in business, it's the same thing. That deadline's coming. You got to do a presentation for your boss. You're like, just let me do the presentation myself. I'll do it. So, but that's your brain kicking in, right? It's your brain telling you. So I go, well, if the lagging indicator is I'm taking over control because my brain's telling me to do it, then the leading indicator is clarity. So we tend to get in the way. And my business coach who works on me, thank you, Preston, I love his saying to me, which is the root of all business challenges are uncommunicated expectations. And it really got my brain going when he said that. This is like a year ago now, and our business is getting better again. It's true. We're not good at communication. We're not good at communicating, period, let alone communicating clarity. Mm-hmm. And if we're not aligned, i.e. we're not on the same line of the same page of the same book, then what does that lead to? It leads to duplication of efforts. It leads to one person doing one thing, one person doing another, to things not getting done in the same way, which means if there's a lot of disruption by not being clear up front, that disruption leads me to take over and be micromanaging and be in control. Sometimes not because I am a micromanager, just because the situation needs it, because we're so up against the clock. So as the Navy SEALs say, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. America is fast, fast, fast. There is no slow. We go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. I got a meeting after this. I had a meeting before this. Meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. And as we start this conversation with growth mindset and curiosity, you need time in your calendar to battle that. But none of us have time in our calendars. So for me, we do have an autonomy issue. We are very micromanaging. It is very command and control and hierarchical and bureaucratic out there. And it's not changing very quick. Because it's not because there's bad people who just don't trust their people or want to be in control. It's because we haven't laid the foundation of clarity in order for autonomy to thrive.
Yes. Yeah, you have to let it thrive. I think that's very important. You have to let people be. You have to let them do as they wish and then see what the result is. But unless you trust and see, you never know what they can do on their own.
And the time and energy to do it, because to empower people and to entrust them needs time. It's like, I'm going to give you this project. You've got a week to do it. Come to me with the results. I would do it this way, but you know what? I'm not going to anchor you. You do it your way. Because they're more than likely going to fail. And again, failure is not acceptable in this country. We have become perfectionists, which is the anti-innovation. I'm shocked anything gets built here anymore. Well, it doesn't. But anyway, it's innovation is about letting people make mistakes. I was with a client last week, and that was the aha moment of, we don't allow people to make mistakes in our driven to win, results only business. We've forgotten about making mistakes. And everyone's just going to the leader going, everything's perfect, everything's great, got it all right, because no one's allowed to get it wrong. I'm like, that's the anti-innovation. So, which all links to autonomy. It's all the autonomy bucket: innovation, creativity, curiosity, allow failure and making mistakes. Again, all links to autonomy. Such a powerful bucket of care.
Yeah. So talking about these things which should be followed more or talked about more, Alex, but what if you could eradicate one leadership myth that actually harms both performance and well-being of employees? And what would that be and why?
I would go, especially here in this country, it's about who does, it's just talking. Right, so extrovert, introvert, preferences. I don't want to say you're extrovert and that's wrong, right? It's a level of preference towards extroversion or introversion. And I'm an ambivert. I'm in the middle. I can go both ways. But it's the fallacy that the people that shout the loudest need to get promoted. Like the extroverts tend to get promoted, and they beat their chests and they rise to the top. And can we stop doing that? For me, it's the quiet and more deliberate leaders are the most powerful leaders, because they allow other people to talk. They allow ideas to manifest themselves before anchored. Simon Sinek said leaders eat last.
Yeah, leaders eat last.
and autonomy is about speaking last. Relationships is about combating your natural conversational narcissism, right? We're all designed to think we should be talking. And the more that we talk, the more that people love us. And it's wrong, right? Clarity is not about you going, hey, here's our vision and this is where we're going. It's allowing other people to contribute. This goes to high-performing teams need high-performing leaders, and high-performing leaders need high-performing teams. We've got to stop leaders from talking too much, i.e. barely at all, right? Everyone's got to stop waiting for their turn to talk and just listen. I always say you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Leaders should use them in that ratio. And I think that we've got to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you must have read the book Quiet by Susan Cain. It's so well written, so well researched. She took years to write that book and talks so much about why introverts make better leaders.
I haven't read that one. I read Quiet Leadership by David Rock and a number of others. And just again, I'll forget what you say, I forget what you do, but I'll never forget how you made me feel. Of course, as an introvert, they're naturally designed to, of course, let you have more of a voice. So, and it's about, and I'll go to the best teams, or your best bosses tend to be the ones that help you, made you feel seen, valued, and heard. And of course, an extrovert is always trying to talk and take over conversations and interrupt because that's what their brain is telling them. Got to be liked and got to be right. Got to talk. I'm talking, people.
Yeah, and sometimes they always very ready to take credit. If an introvert speaks something, they'll just abruptly come in between and start taking their points and being the highlight of a meeting. It happens so many times. Introverts have their own struggle stories.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. In generalizations, doesn't mean all introverts are great leaders and all extroverts are bad. But there's a natural innate habit that an introvert has, of course, which is to be quiet. And actually, the tough part for them is to know when not to be quiet, right? So extroverts need to dial that back. Introverts do need to become a bit more managerial courage. And again, like anything in life, it's about balance, right? It shouldn't all be introversion or all extroversion. Like ambiverts are probably the best leaders. It's no different to politics. We shouldn't just all be on the red or all blue. Purple is probably the best. Same with leadership. You can't have someone who's just amazing at providing clarity and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of clarity, because some people don't like clarity. We have to have balance, and I think that's where the mediocre to the great. That's where the big chasm between a great leader and the millions of mediocre leaders. It's their knowledge and understanding and wisdom about balance, in that every situation is different. Every human is different. Some I need to talk more to. Some I need to talk less to. Some need more clarity. Some need less clarity. Some need lots of autonomy. Some don't know that we need lots of autonomy, but need to be given to it. There's an intuition that it is really hard to teach. Emotional intelligence is such an important skill of leadership. And I wish we would find ways to promote people with high levels of emotional intelligence, develop it at school. And I think to your earlier question, the future is human. The future is human only if we can start teaching emotional intelligence, rewarding emotional intelligence, and making it part of leadership, period. I.e., you only get promoted if you can demonstrate this much level of emotional intelligence.
How do you measure that quantitatively?
Is it EQIs? There's a couple of assessments out there. I'm not a big fan of those, but they're again data points. I think there needs to be a question on the engagement survey or the 360 for the people being led by that person about what are some of the leading indicators of emotional intelligence. Like how self-aware is your boss? Is what they see in the mirror reflective of what you see in the mirror, right? Self-awareness. Do they spend time in their one-on-ones? Do they spend more time on the results or more time on you? Strongly agree, disagree. I'm going to the leading indicators of emotional intelligence, right? Empathy, self-awareness. Under immense stress, do they ever raise their voice? Yes or no, right? These are the types of questions that you could ask the team members to find out how emotionally intelligent they are. Of course, all these assessments and psychometric tests are just so long and crazy. And like, there's way simpler ways to be measuring this stuff. And usually it's the team members that need to be asked. Because how can you be... I love these self-awareness tests for emotional intelligence. So if self-awareness is not self-created, how can I self-assess whether I'm emotionally intelligent or not?
Okay. That's complicated.
We've got to start asking the team members of people about the leading indicators of emotional intelligence.
Yeah. True. Alex, I'm sure all the viewers and the listeners of this episode are going to learn so much from the leadership lessons you have shared. And it all comes down to, not just leading, but also making sure that the employee well-being is taken care of, productivity is taken care of, high performance, everything boils down. Everything is so connected to each other. We discussed so many concepts in this episode, like from introverts, extroverts, the value of trust, how to build high performance teams, how to become good listeners, use your ears more than your mouth. So much more. Quite a bit of learnings and so much to learn from you, Alex. From the years of experience you have been in this field, you had so much to share and so many valuable insights came.
Thank you. And I'll leave you all with this. If it was easy, we'd all do it. Leadership is really tough, if not one of the toughest things you'll ever do to do it effectively. And thank you for having me. Truly appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for the wise questions that you asked, and appreciate the time with you.
Thank you so much, Alex.